Good morning and welcome to the Singapore Fintech Festival. Today is the Talent Summit and we're sitting here in the Rapyd office in the Working Capital building in Singapore. If you're in the virtual map, you can find us in the Boat Key area under the networking zone, and please stay tuned all morning. We've got some great guests to take you through. The format of this session is informal, relaxed, and the idea is for us to get a really good conversation with our guest. And it's an Ask Me Anything. So we're looking for a lot of audience participation. Please post your questions in the chat. I may be checking my phone periodically to find the questions. Definitely not checking sporting scores. Yeah, let's get started. With me this morning, I have the wonderful Kahina Van Dyke from Standard Chartered. And Kahina, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, some of the things that have brought you to Standard Chartered and what you're looking forward to?
To be sitting here with you this morning with our snowman and R2-D2, which I love. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I am Kahina, and I am from Standard Chartered. I'm really excited to be here, and my journey to Standard Chartered is a little bit unique in that I actually grew up in global banking, a couple of decades ago, and in international banking, quite frankly, and at the dawn of the internet, 1.0. Like, we were actually collecting email addresses or not collecting email addresses, and I remember having this argument about, we should collect email addresses, and the CEO says, that's ridiculous, who has an email address? And I was like, well, me and all my friends, but I was like 22 at the time. So, I started in banking with the internet team way back when at Citibank, and then had an international career with Citi, launching new products and markets, and I had a really exciting time in the emerging markets and a lot of work in Central and Eastern Europe, and was there for a really long time. I thought I'd be a banker forever, quite frankly, and then the global financial crisis happened, and innovation really stopped. At a time where back when, I remember, we were launching, online banking, we were doing text alerts for the first time, we were doing all this really cool stuff. And then all of a sudden the global financial crisis happened and the banks were fighting for survival.
Yep.
And so, and for me, it became clear that growth and innovation and creativity was it was just not the time. And I think that's the timing is everything kind of belief system. That's probably when it got instilled in me. And then I went to a global payments company, MasterCard, also international, where the world beyond cash was just emerging.
Yep.
Right? And so all of a sudden we were saying, wait, you mean people are going to be, and especially what we found so interesting is digital payments was taking off in places that actually people didn't even have sometimes bank accounts, and yet they were finding ways to use digital payments and the digital networks and their mobile phones, right?
Yep.
And we were like, wow, this is new. And so I spent a good amount of time in Europe and the Middle East and Africa and South Asia with MasterCard working on all of those things, what that means. And then I got a call from Facebook. And I remember thinking at the time, and I think I said this to them, I'm like, why are you calling me? Because we were worried. We were worried about the tech giants. We were worried about Facebook. And why are you calling me? And they said, you know what? We have been working on a lot of different things in payments and commerce, and we actually realized that we need somebody from the industry. Yeah. We need somebody with this level of expertise, and we don't have it. And then I moved to Silicon Valley, which was an amazing chapter. Worked for big tech. For a few years, and then I went to a startup, a fintech startup with a couple hundred people in crypto, Ripple. If anybody has heard of them, which is a really cool company trying to solve global payments through bridge digital assets, right? Yep. Which is another frontier. But I made the decision that my heart was in being part of the next chapter of banking and helping to write that chapter. And I looked across the entire industry, and Standard Chartered to me had the right collection of values, what kind of bank they were and what they stood for, network, 60 countries, 60 markets, unprecedented diversity in where they are, and places and countries that many people overlook because they're hard to do business, and Standard Chartered has been there for generations, right? And then right? The will to be different, the will to embrace the future, and I'm here, and I've been here for just under a year, and I'm loving every minute of it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I think you know, it's so interesting that journey, because there's a couple of really key turning points in there, and you talked about your MasterCard experience. MasterCard, particularly in developing markets, has a great reputation for fostering innovation and creating labs and those kinds of things. And then you've talked as well about, you know, a big tech shift into money, which is a massive megatrend we're seeing at the moment. It's been a big topic of the conference. And then, you know, at Ripple, the same thing, looking at really different ways to use technology to solve complex problems. So tell us about, you know, this, you also mentioned timing is everything. So tell us about let's talk about Africa and the Middle East for a minute. Why was that the right time to be there? And you know, what did you learn from that experience that stuck with you?
Yeah, so what I learned, I mean, what is happening in the high growth markets, and I don't even like calling them emerging anymore, because I'm like, they've emerged. Like, these are the high growth markets. These are the markets we should all be in and be paying attention to and learning from. I think a lot of times there's this, okay, let's go to these markets and show them what we have. It's like, no, turn that around. You got to learn from the markets and bring it in. But, you know, the reason that at that time it was important is because, listen, M-Pesa had taken off 10 years earlier. Everybody had been like, wow, oh my God, you mean you can bank the unbanked through their mobile phones? Like, what a concept. And there have been a lot of other mobile wallets launched, but if you looked globally, there were only about 10 mobile wallets that had any scale. Why was that, right? And you really had to like take a step back. It's not the technology. Like, everybody thinks like all the technology is available to everyone. It's not the technology. It's all of these other connectivity between stakeholders towards a common purpose. And so what we were doing in the projects I was leading in the Middle East when I was based in Dubai is we were working really closely with companies like Bcash in Bangladesh, who I love Kamal, the CEO, and he's probably going to send me a note. He's going to be like, Kahina, you mentioned me? Yes, I did, because what they've been able to do in that market,
it's awesome, to
connect, you know, the villages, the towns, the farmers, the cheesemakers into a, you know, digital payment system has been phenomenal. And they did it by working with the banks and working with the regulators and working and bringing their technology. And they didn't try to do it on a smartphone. They did it on feature phones because that's what the people had. And so you need to have that real local insight and understanding, but you also have to have trust. You just can't go in and say, look, I'm showing up with great technology. You've got to bring the whole system and all the stakeholders along. So I think that's really important. And then in Africa, we were looking at different, and again, working with the governments, working with the regulators, working with the mobile operators, working with other banks. And I think it's the ecosystem plays that always bring the best results, where it's not self-orientation and self-interest, it's outcome interest, and other people can get behind that.
So, and I'm so glad to hear you say that. We had a session on agri-tech yesterday, and we had Sunny from Olam was talking very much about this exact same thing. The focus has to be lifting the farmers up and giving them a living wage and making their life better in order to achieve the outcome. Otherwise, you know, nobody wins in the long run, right?
Absolutely.
So then, from a Facebook perspective, I mean, that's been a long journey from a developing payments infrastructure and building payments into that platform. And I think what's interesting is there've been lots of experiments that have not worked and lots that have. How do you feel about that? What were the learnings there, and what do you felt that you got to bring into that experience?
Well, I think letting 1,000 flowers bloom is kind of a philosophy that a lot of big tech has, right? They believe that we just try a lot of things and something will work, and that's been pretty effective for them. However, I think there are some areas that needs expertise and depth of experience in order to bring the best solutions to bear. So I'm the most proud of the work that we did at Facebook around the team that I built. Because when I got there, it was a tiny team, mostly just based in the US in Menlo Park. And what I was able to do is I was able to hire people from all over the industry. I was searching and seeking. We're talking about talent today. It's like, who's been in the industry but always been the rebel at the edge, like pushing the industry, right? And you got to know who those people are, and I'm a little bit like that myself, so it takes one to know one. But like really finding great leaders who are all about change and development, and convincing them that if they came to Facebook and they came to big tech from banking, they would be able to move the industry forward. They would be able to do things on that platform in partnership. Because that was the key thing. You cannot do any of these. Listen, financial services and payments is regulated for a reason.
Exactly.
I mean, like it's regulated for a reason because it's important, just like healthcare.
Yep.
It's important, right?
Absolutely.
And so, and that's really different than like posting cool, cat videos, right? And so the reality is we needed people who had expertise and experience. And I'm most proud of that global team because they were global people and great talent in the industry that understood what a payment network did, what a global bank did, what was settlement. I mean, that's kind of boring, but you need it,
yep.
right? And you need people who understand that. And so bringing them into that environment, and then I think it helps tremendously when you're talking about doing things in certain markets. I also brought people, a global team that was based all over the world, right?
Yeah.
We had people in Sao Paulo. I started the Singapore office for payments and commerce. At Dubai office, you need people in location. You cannot do this from central mothership. We're in Star Wars. You can't do this from the mothership
yeah.
in California. It just is not going to be locally relevant. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what I'm most proud of, the people and the perspectives and the local insights that I brought.
I mean, I feel like, now when we look at the way Facebook is doing things in the payment space, a lot of that is there. There is a lot of focus on hyperlocal and having talent in the places where the stuff happens.
They've evolved. Sorry, had to say that. Yeah.
Which is awesome. I'm just going to quickly remind our audience, please feel free, this is an interactive session. I've got a little eye on the phone here, so please make sure that you are throwing your questions in and we'll work those into the conversation. Kahina, in the meantime, crypto, right? Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
I was in crypto for 18 months. I'm very proud of my work there, and I think go for it.
So we've had a really interesting evolution of crypto from a bank perspective, right? So we had this, first there was an allergic reaction. It was like, okay, well, we'll just ignore that and hope it goes away. Then we did the barbell. We like blockchain, but we don't like crypto, right? Which is kind of weird because it's very hard to divorce the two. We're now in a position where we're seeing very traditional firms really go deep, both on blockchain, the technology, using digital assets in different contexts. You're seeing the central banks all talking about CBDC, largely thanks to a large American firm making a lot of noise last year. How do you see crypto evolving, and where? What is it from Ripple that you might have learnt that would inform that view?
Yeah, so listen, one of the reasons why I decided to go to Ripple is because I was interested in, does this whole crypto digital asset space have a real world use case, right? And I think that I wanted to learn from the people who had actually developed the technology and were working on solving something that was a pain point. Right? Yeah. How do you move money more efficiently in real time? Mm-hmm. Because consumers or even small businesses would see the account number move in real time, but the money would actually get there like 5 days later, mm-hmm. right? And often people would say it's quicker to get on a plane with a suitcase of money if it's legal than it is to actually when does money get to the destination. So it's a very specific use case. So I think that digital assets, first of all, I'm a believer in digital assets. Mm-hmm. I'm a believer in tokenization of assets. I think we're going to be in a better place in financial services, definitely a decade from now, and I don't know if it's sooner than that, with tokenization of asset classes. And I think that's going to lead to more democratization of asset classes that might not have been available for many people.
Absolutely.
And it's going to lead to efficiency that is going to unlock value that can be redeployed. And for me, I'm always about redeploying it in places that drive more prosperity and more participants into the system. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm a believer, because the current system is about 40 years old and it's inefficient. Mm-hmm. Now, how do I think the evolution? When I first told people I was going into crypto, my mother was horrified. She's like, "What? What is that? No, is that legal? Are you sure?" But the reality is that there have been some very early big institutions. I think Fidelity has done a great job very early on around digital assets and crypto and trying to unlock that. And what does it mean for wealth? And what does it mean for investing? And I do think that I love the barbell. I've never heard that before. It's great. It's like we like like blockchain, but we're not going to do crypto. And then people finally realized as they started studying and learning about it, it's like, oh, you mean it's kind of the same thing? Yeah, it's different names, but yeah, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, you could kind of distinguish the platform with the use cases, but really, we're talking about digitization of assets, right? And so I think the whole industry has learned a lot. And the reality is that it is a great technology. It's still searching for the quote-unquote killer use case in the real business flows. I do think that there are some companies that are doing some really interesting things, but it's still evolving. And I guess the same question that I could say is, when I started in banking, they weren't so sure about that internet thing either.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I remember.
Yeah, right? I mean, I remember, like, no, we're not going to collect email addresses. Nobody has an email address. So I think that, new technology is always met with skepticism. And that's actually good. I look at when people are challenging, like, what is this thing? It means that you're actually getting to a point where people are having the conversation. And eventually we see that adoption curve and then it takes off very quickly. So I think that's where we are right now with crypto and digital assets. But it's exciting. It's definitely evolved from even 18 months ago.
Absolutely. I think it is a normal part of conversation now. Like, perhaps 24 months ago, you would have been a little bit nervous about mentioning crypto in a corridor in a bank building, right? I think we're seeing that with a number of other technologies as well. In coming back into banking with Standard Chartered, right? What does that challenge look like for you? And one of the things I love about your experience is it's so broad. Yeah, you've got cards and payments and crypto and geographic diversity as well. Traditional banks can be very siloed. You can be very focused on one product, one capability, and actually many people may not understand how the whole thing fits together. What are you bringing into this, and what are you excited about with Standard Chartered?
So the thing that I think is so important is for all of us to kind of accept that we're in this digital future together.
Yep.
And it's happening, right? It's not happening in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. It's happening now. And so what I was the most excited about joining is there was an understanding that it's happening now and that we need to actually take a leadership position. And this is before, the pandemic shut everything down and forced anybody who was a laggard, like, digital hit you in the face, right? You were like, what? Wait, what's Zoom? Like, oh, okay, I guess we do it like this now. So the point is, though, that this pivot to not just catching up. It's not about technical capabilities. It is actually about our industry. Financial services is becoming a digitized experience. Mm-hmm. And if we want to remain, we've got this rich history of 150 plus years at Standard Chartered. And there is complete recognition at the board level, the global CEO level, my CEO, there's a complete, and all of my peers, there's a complete understanding that we actually have an opportunity to lead.
Yes.
We can lead in providing digital banking services on our platform. And if we just take a moment to think about that, we always talked about having a network that spans the world. But now let's think about having a platform that serves the world.
Yeah.
And if you think about a platform that serves the world through digital connectivity and bringing insights through data and analytics and offering core banking services, real-time and instantaneous, that becomes a really exciting future, and that allows our clients to grow and allows new clients to emerge. And so I think that's what I'm most excited about, because that transformation of being a global network to being a global platform and serving many, many countries and many markets and many clients that are not being served by some of the other global players.
I mean, it's really refreshing to hear you say that. I mean, having been in the industry for a little while, I think now is a really exciting time for all of us, and we're getting to rethink what does it mean to be a bank, and what does it mean for the role that we play in society. You talked a bit about access, right? And we talked, you mentioned emails and collecting emails, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, who do we give internet access to, and who gets an email, and should this person have an email, and should that? And it was actually by providing universal access both across an organisation, but also more broadly to everybody's home and mobile, that has spawned this huge change in the way that the world works and much greater prosperity and connectivity. What's interesting, if you look at the fundamentals of crypto, it's about democratizing money and improving access. I'm not saying that that's the holy grail, or the only way to do that. Mm-hmm. How important do you think access to financial services is, and what do you think that could mean for the next 10 years?
So I think driving more prosperity and what I call equitable prosperity in the world, there's actually nothing more important that I feel as far as a legacy of this industry. To take this kind of concept of banking, which used to be, way back when only very, very, very wealthy people had bankers, right?
Yep.
Because you needed assets to protect. To take this concept of banking from a certain set of people that have a certain set of assets, a certain value, to say that banking drives prosperity for small businesses and medium-sized businesses that are employing members of their community, that are developing leaders, that are allowing people to access new markets when you talk about trade.
Yep.
How do you change the life of a company when they're all of a sudden able to connect to a whole new group of consumers or a whole new group of suppliers or people that are looking for their goods and services? You're changing a company, you're changing employees, you're changing their families, you're changing community, and you're driving more prosperity. And so that, to me, is really what this is about. This is about having more prosperity in the hands of more people and closing that gap. Because today, a lot of the world's problems, you could argue, is about that gap.
Yep.
And do people feel like they have a fair chance to win, to be entrepreneurs, to grow their companies, to launch companies? And so as the ecosystem becomes more inclusive and people have more access, more people are going to have access to those capital pools and to that prosperity for their own families and their own communities. And that's what's driven me. The reason I'm so proud to be a banker for the last 25 years, that's what drives me.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're doing. And I think the industry, if you look back, you just said, where have we come in 20 years? Where have we come in 10 years? Where are we right now? I'm the most excited than I've ever been. And I've seen all of these evolutions because I think we all finally understand our transformative role in society.
Yeah.
It's not just about the dollars and cents, which has traditionally been the love language.
I think that's such a nice way to put it, and I don't say that to be dismissive. It really is, and I think this the caring about customers and caring about the impact that we're having. That's actually I think that came through very strongly in what you're talking about, and it's really important. So let's turn quickly to talent, right? And how important do you think a different kind of leadership might be to take us, to the next place?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to say something to all of you who are thinking about what you want to do next. You might be early in your career, you might be mid in your career, you might be quite senior. What I want to say is, if you are a talented, purpose-driven person who wants to change the world, call me. Because the reality is that it's not about strategy anymore. It's about strategic execution. And strategic execution means you have leaders who can make the decisions on a daily basis, who are empowered, who are driven, who are purposeful, who look at the challenges of change and they get excited as they hit barriers, right? They're like, oh, that's a problem. How do I solve the problem? Oh, that's a gap. How do I bridge the gap? So I personally believe that, and I've said this many times, people used to say, oh, there's a war for talent. And I'm like, the war is over. Talent has won. Okay, so the reality is companies who can attract the best talent, the best leaders are going to win. And I look at what we're doing. Listen, we're digitizing across dozens of countries. We're digitizing across all of our channels. We're digitizing our business. Technology, digital first, data-driven, digital first, that's what we're doing. But let me be clear. The transformation is a leadership transformation. The technology is enabling. It's a culture transformation, and it's a mind shift. And so I believe that the companies who are going to be, quote unquote, winning and leading over the next decade are going to be places that are talent magnets, that understand the role of leadership in executing these wonderful strategies that we have.
That's really cool. In terms of talent, and I'm going to come to diversity for a minute, right?
My favorite topic.
And what's interesting, and I mentioned your diverse experience before, sometimes, in my view, I think we get very fixated on the optics of diversity, and we forget about the authenticity of diverse experience, diverse perspective, and diverse personal history. I mean, how do you look at that when you're building a new team?
So I am a believer that the best teams in the world-class teams, are the most diverse teams. And that's because when you're all sitting around the table and you have a problem that is a big problem, if I have 12 people around the table who have all come from similar backgrounds and similar experiences and similar perspectives, I'm going to get one answer. If I have 12 people who represent the world, who have come from different corners of the world, who have cognitive diversity, meaning they solve problems in different ways, who have experiential diversity, and a lot of times demographics is a proxy for experiential diversity, because if you grow up in Tanzania, that's going to be different than Hong Kong, which is going to be different than Warsaw, which is going to be different than Sao Paulo, okay? So there is a relation between experiential diversity and kind of, where people come from. So I think that's important to know. But I also would say with diversity, especially with, gender diversity, that is, I think, something that we have all recognized, that it just doesn't make sense to have all of the same people at the table. So if that is the case, then how do we bring those people to the table? How do we get the seat ready for them? How do we get them ready for the seat? And how do we just force this issue? Because I hear sometimes people go, I can't find anybody. Well, that's not true. You just don't know anybody. Can we just separate the difference between you can't find anybody and you don't know these people? Because you're actually socially isolated. I've said this to global CEOs of huge tech companies who shall remain nameless. I'm like, you're socially isolated. That's why you don't know these people. They didn't go to your school. They didn't grow up in your neighborhood. They weren't part of your fraternity or your sorority. They weren't part of your church. You don't know them. But they exist. And so the first step in diversity is understanding that those people exist and they have something to bring that is going to be valuable to you as an individual and valuable to the organization. And I'm really proud of the diversity. Like, diversity is in our DNA at Standard Charter. It's just in our DNA. I mean, just because of the nature of where we do business. But what I'm most proud of is we have made that show up in our leadership team. We have made that show up it's not just talk. It's actually showing up. And by showing up, we're having much more robust conversations. And I think it's why we're probably going to be able to take a leadership position in many places, because we're bringing that type of diversity to the table.
Yeah, no, that's, it's so refreshing to hear that characterized in such a strong way. I think that geographic diversity is really important. Because you can get so caught in your bubble, and it's not just your social circle, which you articulated so well in that social isolation, but that experiential homogeneity is problematic, because the experience of paying with M-Pesa in a developing market, or the concept of having to travel for 3 days within a country to take your salary back to your family. These are things that, particularly if you're, if you are in the Valley and you're a well-funded tech startup, they're experiences you haven't had.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one thing I will say about the Valley, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but, you've got some really brilliant, bright people, but it is one of the least diverse places I've ever been in. And I think that is, you can have great tech, and that's why I say leadership is about the people, because you can have great tech, but if you don't know how to apply it to fix that problem of 3 days to travel home to get your paycheck, and it's just kind of intellectually interesting to you, but you don't feel it, you're not going to really have the insight to deliver the right solution at scale.
Yeah, there's something about sitting on a bus with chickens and goats that brings problems into sharp relief.
Sharper vision. It's like the sound of the chickens or something. I don't know. But yes, I totally agree with you.
Awesome. So I'm going to take an audience question now.
Okay.
So thanks, guys. Please do keep the questions coming. If you've been following the announcements made during SFF this year, or the topics that have been discussed, is there anything that's resonated very strongly, or something that you think is particularly transformational for the industry?
Well, I think we're all talking about the right things. I personally think the conversations around the purpose-driven nature of sustainability, the purpose-driven nature of our role in this industry, has become really apparent and really important. So how are we driving financial inclusion? How are we driving sustainability? Like, it's our planet. Like, I don't think there's another one we've identified yet, right? R2-D2 aside. We have got to figure out a way to allow more people in, to drive more prosperity, and to have a more sustainable future. And I think that those conversations, it's kind of sprinkled in every conversation now, right? Where, again, 2, 3, 4 years ago, yeah, people were talking about access and some parts of financial inclusion, but the sustainability conversation wasn't as strong.
Yes.
And I think taking that role of, it's not just about a business model to attract more people in so you get a high valuation, it's actually like intrinsic to the role that we have. And I think that all of the stakeholders, the startups, the big banks, the regulators, everyone is starting to understand that role and hopefully continue to carry that mantle of leadership. It's
really interesting. To me, there's a very different feeling to the way we're talking about sustainability now. So I was lucky enough to be building a carbon trading desk back in 2008, right?
And that was early.
Yeah, so well, at that time, a lot of banks and a lot of large corporates were starting to focus on carbon neutrality. So the discussion was a bit different, but there was still that Barclays had built a really strong carbon trading business in Europe. We were looking at that in Australia at the time. But then the global financial crisis happened and everyone forgot about it, right?
Oh, totally. It was like, you're right, because there was all this investment in like wind farms off of the coast of Holland, and like everybody was talking about carbon neutral.
Yep,
and then global financial crisis was like,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the planet's fine.
God, yeah, it's true though.
But do you? I mean, I guess, how do you think it's different? You know, it is a very different conversation today. You know, we saw at Davos last year. It was such a big topic. We've since had not only you know, massive fires in Australia and California. We've had a huge number of other weather-related situations across the world. But the conversation has changed.
It has.
For you, how do you feel that change, and how's that shaping what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, well, you know, just like, you know, being on the bus with chickens can sharpen your focus, I think when you're, you know, sitting inside your house and you can't go outside for a week because the smoke is too strong, that also kind of like sharpens the focus. So I think more people are realizing and experiencing what is happening. And there's just a level, consciousness has risen, right? And I think that as consciousness, and World Economic Forum in Davos did a great job last year of saying this is important. But also I feel like the leaders, like our global CEO,
yep.
And I'm not just saying this because he's my boss, but I think, you know, Bill has said this is a really important part of who we are as business, as leaders, as stakeholders, and this is going to be part of our business. So how do we invest in sustainable finance? How do we deliver? I mean, you think about digital, and I think about that a lot because we are digitizing all of our platforms. What does it mean when we actually allow zero-touch issuance of insurance, policies, where before we had to go back and forth and sign 25 pieces of paper? What does that mean when you can do kind of online KYC with a video, and I don't have to have someone, you know, go down, drive down, it can all be done real time, instantaneous. I think that especially with everything that we're doing in digital, as we're reducing friction for consumers, we're also allowing more sustainable platforms. And I will say that I can only hope that we build more and more sustainability into our business plans and have a very clear understanding how that is driving not just a better planet, but healthier societies and communities and citizens.
So, yeah, so that key point there is that building it in, right? It needs to be intrinsic into the way we're operating. When you look out the window and we look at the conference that we've been holding here, and we look at fintechs and we look at these, you know, young, enthusiastic teams, and, you know, all of this energy and capital being deployed. How far do you think we've come, and how far do you think we need to go as an industry before sustainability is just part of what we do?
Well, I'm really hopeful about this generation of leaders. I mean, I just think that we are at a time where the consciousness of the leaders who are coming in, starting their careers, earlier in their careers, this is just the way they think. It's not the way the generation of bankers that I grew up thought. right? I don't know. They watched too much Wall Street movies. I don't know what happened, but like that generation was different. But I do think that we have a much higher level of consciousness around sustainability, around social justice, around our role in the world of making things more equitable, and so I'm actually very optimistic about our future because I do see all of these companies coming out, and what they're saying is, I want to have a good business, I want to do well, and I want to do good at the same time.
Yeah.
And those things, not only are they not in contradiction, which I think my old generation of bankers that I grew up with, a lot of times like, oh, wait, we're not a nonprofit, we're not a
charity.
Right, we're not a charity, right? That language isn't used anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with a raising of consciousness and awareness, but it also has to do with the younger generation that is pushing the fact that these have to be part of business models. Sustainability has to be part of your business model. Inclusivity has to be part of your leadership plan and your talent acquisition. More equitable distribution of access and connectivity and prosperity has got to be part of what you're doing, and it's a more purpose-driven. So I think that we are, the fintechs need to keep on growing, keep on pushing, because I think it makes us all better, quite frankly.
I think, and we're coming back to people really in a big part of that, right? It's the mindset, the culture, the way we're asking people to show up at work. You put out a call earlier for talent, right?
Yes. Did everybody hear my call? You heard my call? Good. All right.
And I think that's really important. But what if I want to be part of that journey? If I want to be, I'm out there at the moment. I might be a bit disillusioned with the organisation that I'm in. I might be. Either I've got startup fatigue, or I've got.
That's real, by the way. Right? That's real.
Or I've got institutional fatigue, where
and that's real.
Exactly, where I've been bouncing between silos for a little while. What is your message of hope? How should I show up? How should I think about that? And how can we all change or evolve to be better at that?
So what I would say is diversity of experience is really, really important. And I think that as we think about ourselves and our career plans, I mean, I worked at the big companies, the big banks, then I worked at big tech, then I worked at little companies, now I've gone back to banking. I think that you want to create in yourself a diversity of experiences. And when you are purposefully, like when I felt like, okay, actually, I don't think there's enough innovation happening for where I am and the energy I want to bring, it's time for me to go do something else. And to not be afraid to lean in, because what's going to happen is you're going to become richer for it. Even if you're working 90 or 100 hours a week at a startup, the reality is you're going to get a different perspective. And you're going to be more empathetic, and you're going to be more insightful to have that diversity of experiences. So I really encourage people to when they're feeling fatigued, don't just say, I'm going to sit here and just like show up and be It's like, make a choice, and a proactive choice. And sometimes you don't have to leave the institution. Sometimes you just need to move continents, right? Sometimes you just need to move roles. But other times you do need to make those hard choices, and they're scary. But listen, if they weren't scary, they wouldn't be interesting. And so you have to create your own diversity of experiences, a portfolio of experiences that are just going to make you more valuable and more empathetic, and hopefully more impactful in the future.
That embracing fear, I think, is a really important message. But it's quite counter to what we've seen in job ads in banking forever, right? Which is, I'm looking for someone who's been doing this job for 10 years, right? I still remember looking for someone a job role. I think, when was it? So somebody was looking for someone who had 10 years experience in grid computing, and grid computing had been around for like 3 years, right? And I was like, guys, we just, this is clearly a copy and paste job ad, right? Like, and so I think, from when we look at our talent acquisition, I think, and the structure around that, there's a lot to, it's very easy to go, oh yeah, no, I want someone with 10 years experience in this thing. But really what we want is someone with 10 years of having to cope with fear and do challenging and difficult things that are different in order to get, as you say, that diversity of experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, last couple of questions. 2020 has been an interesting year.
Yes.
For you personally, what do you think's been a lesson or an experience that's been truly valuable to come out of that?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, listen, the first thing I would say is us human beings are incredibly adaptable. And adaptable in a way of there is a situation that none of us could have predicted, right? None of us could have predicted this, that just hit us all at the same time. That was really, really, really scary. That challenged everything that we'd ever learned about how to work, how to school, how to commune with family and friends. I mean, every aspect of our life, overnight almost, was different. And I think after those first couple of weeks of like, is this gonna go away?
Yeah, when are we going back to normal?
But yeah, like it's just, I mean, is this, wait, what, this is not changing? We all adapted in an incredibly challenging time. So I think what it taught for me, and I said this to people, you know, I came into the role right before the pandemic hit. I'd moved to Singapore, came into the role, and then the whole world changed. And after that shock of, I think it was about 4 weeks of complete shock that this isn't gonna last, after that acceptance comes, it goes, wait a minute, we are all about change. We are all about transformation. And this is a moment of transformation for our society as a human society. And therefore, there is opportunity here. Now, it's hard to see because there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of suffering at the same time, but there is opportunity. And I think that we were all able, and in many ways, I saw my team, and we moved to daily stand-ups, right? And but guess what? We still have daily stand-ups, even though some of us are now back in the office. It's brought us closer together somehow, and it made us realize the impossible is always possible.
Yep.
And if that doesn't, you know, inspire us to, in a more normalized world that we're hopefully moving into, the impossible is always possible in every aspect of our being, then, you know, this is the moment for transformation. And so let's lean in. And what's there to be afraid of, right?
No, that's brilliant. I just want to take one last audience question. In the process of a digitisation journey, how do we deal with the culture gap between an old mindset and a new digitisation mindset where people have internalised the application of technology to human problems?
Culture, who said this, eats strategy for breakfast every single day. So the reality is, again, it's not about the coding, although I love developers. I can do nothing without developers. So please, any developers out there, we love you too. Please come.
Absolutely.
Come. Like, we have squads and squads of developers who I'm eternally grateful for every single day. But the transformation is not about the technology applications. The transformation is around how are we going to work together? How are we going to unlock human potential? How do I look at someone across from me who's very different than me and unlock all of their creativity and all of their problem solving and all of their energy and all of their passion in a directed, purposeful way? And so cultures that are collaborative are transparent.
Yep.
Cultures that are transparent drive trust. Cultures that can give feedback, we can actually argue, we can actually have a heated debate, because you know what? You're passionate about this, and so am I. And at the end of it, we can know that our interests are aligned, even though our paths we might have different divergent paths. And so this is a culture change, which is why you need such strong, powerful, purpose-driven leaders who can leave their ego at the door and focus on the outcome. And those leaders are your culture carriers. And that's how culture change is going to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much power in that. And this, so that's, to me, another reflection in this discussion, which is about self-awareness and mindfulness. You know, you've talked a lot about creating a culture, connecting people, and building talent. But in the way that you've characterised that, there's a lot of focus on self and how do I show up to work every day. I want to leave or finish the session focusing on 2021 and what's coming up. What's your advice to people from a self-awareness, from a mindset perspective on how we show up to work? What would your ask be for people for 2021?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that question, because I really believe that, it does start with each of us individually and owning, really truly owning our journey, right? And owning how, and in order to own it, we've got to be honest with ourselves about the things we're working on, right? So like, what are the areas that we know that we need to get better at? And in that, and feeling safe to speak your truth, and feeling safe to say things to people that you might think that they don't agree with, but still being able to have that dialogue.
Yeah.
And that takes courage. And so your self-awareness, the awareness starts with, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What do I truly believe in? And am I in the environment where I can be myself and speak my truth and not hide behind what I think is acceptable?
Yeah.
Because we are not going to solve the problems of the world on our planet and in our society, in our banking systems, in our digital transformation, in our fintech world, unless we have individuals who are waking up every morning and saying, you know what, I have a truth that is just as valid as the truth of the other person across the table from me. My value is the exact same, and together, we are actually going to be able to solve this problem. There's no individual genius. There's collective wisdom to solve problems. And so understanding you as an individual helps you define how that collective wisdom is going to solve the problems of the world. And we are dependent on each other.
Kahina, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to talk with you. I think it's been great. This has been the perfect session to start with the Talent Summit with. We've talked about breadth of experience. We've talked about the importance of talent. Remember, if you fit that profile of a motivated, talented individual, please contact René.
See, I didn't know this would be an acquisition channel, but just to let you know, I'm open for business.
We've also then talked about the importance of impact and that being intrinsic to the way we do things, being connected, being human in what we do, and ensuring that we are being, providing the best of ourselves to the planet and to the problems that we need to solve. And lastly, for 2021, focus on your self-awareness. Leave your ego at the door and be open to challenge, but also to speak your truth. What a wonderful session. Thank you so much for joining us at the Singapore Fintech Festival. We're here in the Rapyd office for the Ask Me Anything sessions. That's located in Boat Quay in the networking zone. And have a fantastic rest of your conference. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kahina.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was fun. That's the best type, right?
Exactly.
Fun, and I hope we had something to say that connected with someone in their journey.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.